Thanks so much for stopping by for day number 10 of my holiday cards and gift tag series. I think these Joy TriFold cards might be my favorite cards so far, although I'm really not sure if that's a true story. But I love them so much, so let's get started. I love dies that fill up a card, so all you have to do is add a little bit of visual interest to your card. And in my 2020 trip fashion so far, I've been using a lot of pattern paper. So I grabbed some more pattern paper and I made cards with this new pattern paper. And this is how the TriFold card works, and it just folds open and it's one die. And of course I had to add some flowers and some leaves. And I just love the way they came out, and with the different pattern papers that are out there now, you can make a bunch of different kind of cards. Now the very first card that I made actually is this one, and I put the die on incorrectly, and it is not a TriFold card, and you will see when I'm making it I get a little puzzled. To change it up a little bit, I thought I'd add a polar bear ice skating on this TriFold card with paper from Fawn. So let me show you this memory box Christmas plaid paper. It is absolutely stunning. And I started out with a Concord the 9th full of Joy TriFold, and there's also a matching stamp. I am so in love with this plaid paper. The front side of it has some gold highlights to the plaid, and then the back side of it has no gold if you choose not to go the gold. But the gold is so stunning and so classic, and it was really hard for me to decide which one I wanted to start with for today's card. So you've got a light colored plaid. I just love the way they look. Look how beautiful that little thin line of gold is there, and perfect for your holiday cards. And then I have this particular paper here from My Favorite Things. I'm sorry, I said Fawn earlier. It's My Favorite Things, and this is a very fun, playful paper that you can use for a lot of gift tags. I can envision a lot of different things with this paper. And Catherine Pooler has some really cool paper. It's single-sided, but it's 80 pound. It's a really heavy weight paper, and I love that paper. So I started out with your 5.5 by 8.5 piece of cardstock, scored at 4 1/4, and I fold it in half with my bone folder. And then I had another 5.5 by 4 1/4 piece of cardstock that I'm going to cut this Joy out. I'm using these are my angled wire cutters, and they get right in there. There's dies, and you can cut them really, really close. And I put everything in my magnetic bowl. And if you ever lose any dies on your table, if you have a magnetic bowl, if you kind of pass it over on your table, it will scoop up those dies really quickly. So this fits exactly on a 4 1/4 by 5.5 piece of cardstock. I'm taping it down with my mint tape from scrapbook.com. I like it. This tape, I don't love it. The Joy the Joy die cut has a score line right there. So I fold it forward just a tiny, and then I fold it back, and I enforce that with my bone folder, so I have a really nice fold. I tried using 1/4-inch tape for this, and I decided that I liked liquid adhesive better because you have a little more wiggle room in putting your Joy onto the back of your card. So I also cut this pattern paper down to 4 1/4 by 5.5, and I like to put the fold on my table, and I put the pattern paper on the table, kind of push them together, and that way if I have a little extra, as you can see on the right, I can trim it off with my trimmer, and that way I'm not trimming off the fold. So I am putting this Joy on incorrectly. It is supposed to go on the back side of the card, not the front side of the card. And as I said, I started out with 1/4-inch tape. I ended up using liquid glue. I find it was a lot easier to adhere it. But this is kind of how I did it. Held it, trying to line up you can see I'm struggling with trying to get it all lined up there. I want to make sure I line it up. I don't want to see too much of it. And there you go. So there's the fold, as you can see on the top part there. I don't like seeing that. I like my cards to have a clean line. So I cut another 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of cardstock, and I'm just laying on top of that so you do not see that edge of that fold. I think it gives it a much cleaner look. You can do that, not do that. That's totally up to you. It's just something I like to do. I do swatch all of my cardstock, and I have a link below with a video to show you how I do that. So I'm looking for the right color, and I cut 3 of every letter out, and this is kind of how I glue it. I do 2 of each, and then I stack them on top of each other, line them all up. Doing it, don't you wish you could do things this fast in real life? So I stacked up 3 of each, and then I glued those on top of the big white joy that I already adhered to my card base. And I'm using liquid glue because, again, I find it's a lot easier to use liquid glue because you have a little bit of wiggle room while you're using your liquid glue. I like to put something heavy on top of my die cuts when I'm working, just to give it a chance to adhere nice and flat and not lift up on any of the edges. So I have these really big acrylic blocks that I like to use. And then I have this Concord 9th Fresh Cut Florals 3, and I cut a bunch of the petals out of red, and then I want to ink them up a little bit. So I'm using their Concord 9th Cranberry ink with a little mini dauber. And for these particular flowers, I'm just inking up the center and feathering it out to the edges. I'll show you how I do it. And it just adds just enough interest, a little more visual effect, so it's not such a flat looking flower. It has a little more texture, and it has a little more depth, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I do try to do this with a lot of my die cuts. I do like to add just a little bit of color, either on the edges or in the centers or just wherever I feel like I need to do that. I'm showing you this to make sure you wash your hands and your table really well so you don't get red ink on everything, and ask me why I'm showing you that, because I always get red ink on everything. So I'm folding my flowers and just giving them a little bit of texture, but when you put these in the card, they get flat anyhow, so it probably doesn't really matter. It just makes me feel happy. So I put a little bit of tape on the bottom of that first flower because I want it to stay put while I'm gluing on the other flowers. And I just use just a little bit of liquid glue, and I adhere it all. And I do that with all the petals. I zhuzh them up, as Laura Fedora likes to say, and just give them a little fold, little bend, little twist, little twirl. And this is my last petal. And I really like the way this flower came out. I hadn't had the opportunity to use this before, so it looks to me a little bit like a poinsettia, maybe, maybe. And then I have these little green leaves, and I'm adding a little bit of Concord 9th Evergreen ink on top of those. Again, just add a little bit of interest, a little bit of texture, so it's not so flat. So when I'm done with all of this, that's what it looks like with the ink on it. So when I'm done with all this, I'm trying to figure out, well, where do I line these up? I want to line these up on my card. I did cut a center out of gold, and I did glue that down to kind of pull the gold from the line of the cardstock. And I decided to put this particular flower on the J for the joy, and I want to make sure it's in the center so you don't see the back of the flower or the messy part of the back of the flower. Then I tuck in the leaves and glue those down as well. And I did 3 leaves, or 3 little stems, I guess. They're really not leaves, or stems. And I thought that came out really nice. And then as I'm looking at it, to show you that this cool little TriFold card, I realized that I didn't make a TriFold card. And I am puzzled. I'm looking at it going, what did I do? So this is a situation where you do as I say, not as I do. You do not adhere this to the top part of the card, you adhere it to the bottom part of the card. So I grabbed another one of those plaid papers from Memory Box, did the exact same thing, only I'm using cream paper this time, or off-white, not a white. And I'm trying to pick out which red I think would look the best. Assembled it the exact same way. I used liquid adhesive this time rather than the score tape, and it worked out much, much better. And I'm just making sure now that I'm actually making a TriFold card, since I made a boo-boo the first time around. And this is how it worked best for me once I actually get it in my hand and stand it up. As I stand it up and I butt that up right up against it, and then you kind of have to hold it. Since it is liquid glue, you do have to hold it for a second to make sure that it stays. But that also, score tape will adhere right away, but you don't have any wiggle room, and I like wiggle room. I like an opportunity to move it if I need to. So I'm putting another piece of 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch cardstock on the back to hide that fold over. And now I'm going to be making some more flowers. Only this time I decided to use this Pink Fresh Gathered Twigs ink, and I'm testing it to see what the color looks like on the red. And I decided to do the edges of the flower petals rather than the centers. And it's a little off camera. I will eventually move my hand up and realize that I'm off camera. And I do this for all of the petals, and you can see it just adds just a tiny little bit of interest. I'm zhuzhing them up again, putting them together the exact same way, gluing it down. The only difference is this time I decided to do a different center. That's Altenew Rose Gold embossing powder, and I cut out the center, and I had this on my finger, and I just squished it in my Versamark ink, and you can see it way over in the lower right hand corner. And I'm going to hit that with my embossing powder, and I'm going to do this 3 times. I'm going to sprinkle it on there. I'm going to heat it. I'm going to put it in the Versamark, sprinkle it on, heat it, and I'm going to do that 3 times. That gives me a really thick looking die cut. And comparing the two, I really like the look of this die cut better than the one I cut out of gold cardstock. So I'm went through my stash, and I got a whole bunch of different leaves because I thought, well, maybe I could just do a couple more leaves here and have a little more visual interest rather than having all of the same. I did not ink these up because they were very fragile, and I was afraid I was going to break them all. And I'm just tucking them behind my Y. And I'm trying to make sure that I don't see all of the edges. Sorry about my hair. Behind the Y, I want to make sure that they're kind of tucked in so I'm not seeing all the raw edges. And you have to be kind of quick because I already glued the flower down, and I want to make sure I can tuck them underneath. Now the die also came with this banner, and I thought maybe I'd do a banner sentiment, but I changed my mind and I went with the Joy to the World because I really like it. And since it's a brand new stamp, you need to condition it, so I just use my thumb and fingers to get all of the slickness off so the ink adheres a little bit better. I hit this with my anti-static powder tool, and I'm putting that same rose gold powder on there. I popped it up with foam tape, and it actually is a TriFold card, and I think the card came out absolutely fabulous. I just think it's stunning, and it's like a grown-up card. And then I'm going to use the Catherine Pooler Through the Woods paper for this card. Exact same way, cut it all out the same, did everything the same. This time I'm using these brown leaves, and I'm kind of laying them out, but I decided that they're a little bit too long, so I'm just cutting them off the stem and just cutting off the extra petals. I wanted to put some pine cones or something on it, but I didn't have any pine cones in my die stash. So I'm just gluing those down, and then where I can, I'm gluing the top part down so it's not flopping. This is a very fragile card. I'm going to have to give it to somebody who's not really rough with their cards because it's got these really fragile leaves. And then I put these red glitter, they're gems, dots, I'm not even sure what you call them, on the bottom of the leaves. I wanted to put 3, I didn't have room, so I added a couple of more, and I think that came out really nice. It's very different than the previous 2 cards that I did. I heat embossed the white Love and Joy onto the same red cardstock, cutting it out with a banner die. I will link all of the products in my YouTube description, but all of them are in my blog post, so you can check that out. And here is that was my 3rd card. Now, I love the color, I love to die cut, and sometimes I don't use them all, so I have these baseball cards holders, and I keep them in a binder, and I put all of my extra die cut pieces in these baseball card holders. And whenever I don't feel like coloring something, I go through it and see what do I have. So I'm like, oh, well, I really like that polar bear ice skating. So I'm going through this My Favorite Things paper to see, well, which one would go well with this guy ice skating. And I decided that this polka dot would be absolutely perfect. So I made the card exactly the same as everything else. 4¼ by 5½. I scored the joy. This time I did a blue back and a white joy. And then as I was cleaning up some foam tape, I realized that you could see all of that mess when you opened up the card. So I cut out another of the polar bears. I cut up one of the banners and I glued them behind. So when you opened it up, you didn't see the tape. You just saw the polar bear and you saw the banner. And I put a little Wink of Stella on the joy for that particular card so it matched the polar bear shininess. So then I wanted to do the envelope. So I used the Simon Says Stamp Grid Transparency to line everything up. And I'm lining up the joy. I lined up To the World. And my favorite way to ink up envelopes is just to use Versamark ink. It gives it like a watermark look without heat embossing it, without color, without white, without black. It just gives it a very subtle look. And if you line it up on your square flap, it works really well on your V flap as well. And I just love the way this comes out. And then of course the white envelopes, I can't do that. So I went with my ink swatches. I have videos on how to do all these things and have a lot of free downloads for you if you'd like to take a look. And I used some blue ink for this. And I just love the way these cards came out. I hope you give them a try. I'm so enthralled with them sometimes. And the envelopes really make a difference. And there's big girl cards. I don't know why I say that, but usually I just color sweet little images, and these are more like grown-up cards for me. I'm not really sure why I'm even saying that. It's just kind of how I feel. And every single one has a matching envelope. They're all different. They're all used pattern paper, and they were really, really quick and easy to make, especially if you color one little image. And so I hope you give them a try. I really thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. This Concord 9th Joy TriFold die is really something that you might want to add to your stash. Thanks so much.